Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, February 10th, 2026. Double digits for February. So we're racing through February, which means it'll soon be March, and we'll race through that. And you know how time is. It's linear. It goes this way. If you're counting down in anticipation of, the end of the Trump era, for instance, that might be something you might be looking forward to. 1,075 days remaining in Trump's legal term of office. And no word on whether he's going to try to find some way to extend that legally or extra legally, but he keeps, he really enjoys threatening people with that, and it drives people up the wall. So there we are. Every day we check in and say, oh my God, that's happening. And may or may not be happening. The more immediate concern, of course, 266 days until, I guess, what we used to call Election Day, and now is sort of the cessation of the voting period, because every answer is yes and no, with minor exceptions for mail-in ballots that can be postmarked up to a certain number of days past Election Day in certain states, but which Donald Trump is working feverishly to undo. That might not be the worst thing in the world. But also, I guess, lay that alongside the fact, I don't know if we've made mention of it anywhere in the show, but this too looming into background, the federal government's interest in, and when I say the federal government, I mean Donald Trump's interest in revising postal regulations, rules, laws. I'm not sure what. We'll have to see if we can find some writing on the subject. But a change in practice in the Postal Service such that mailed items will no longer be guaranteed to get postmarked on the date in which they're dropped off in post office custody. You know, there used to be like that was like a legal, legally valid proof of having mailed something by a certain date because the post office was obligated to postmark it the day you turned it in. So for purposes of taxes, for purposes of voting, for purposes of proving things to other people in private litigation, perhaps legally, that you had mailed something on time, that standard, that benchmark may yet disappear, and there's no particular reason for it. I'm sure they probably came up with some sort of efficiency explanation for it. Now, why should we be the ones in charge of keeping people honest and on time? Do it yourself. But I think it's more likely aimed at, postmark is no longer an indication legally in a court of law, for instance, if we're challenging your vote that you have in fact mailed your vote on time. Why? That could mean anything. Or I don't know why that would work exactly. Like, this proves that I mailed it on time. It's the day before Election Day. Well, that doesn't mean you mailed it on that day. No, it means I would have mailed it even earlier than that. But I think what they're looking for there is ballots that are dropped off on Election Day or whatever the cutoff day is in a certain state that can be left to languish in a back room and then be postmarked the next day and therefore be declared late and be challenged. And to be honest, with the Trump operation the way it is, even if the state law says you can mail things up to and including Election Day, they would, and it got postmarked Election Day, they would still sit there and say, well, this is technically late. And we don't know whether they postmarked this after the polls closed or whatever. And they would challenge. I guess you probably can know that. And I don't think postmarks actually timestamp. But I don't know. It's been a while since I've actually examined a postal mark like that. But, I don't know. But certainly their intention is to befoul the process, and lots of people speculating about different ways that they can do it. I keep seeing, relatively smart people, and I still think they're largely right about what their conclusion is, but a lot of smart people, good-thinking people, right-thinking people, you might say, speculating on social media about about the various theories that people advance in terms of how they think Trump might cheat in the upcoming midterm elections. And certainly all the polling indicates that it would be in his interest to get that done, because he, by ordinary measures, looks to be getting ready to be swept out of power that way. So it wouldn't surprise anybody if he were, in fact, preparing for that. But a lot of people who are confused by the theory which holds that some manipulation of who gets seated in the next Congress, it could be subject to manipulation by Republicans. It is awfully difficult to envision it happening, and B, being pulled off, you can't say correctly, but in the manner in which those espousing the theory have described. And, of course, also having it stick. And I don't know that anybody would accept it as legalistic enough for them to jump out of the way of. And it is an awfully far-fetched situation. But I don't know. They keep what is interesting is they keep citing the fact that, of course, the House of Representatives, not considered to be a continuing body, although I quite honestly not so happy with the theory of the continuing body theory in the Senate either. There's reason to think that, too, might have to be upended one day, and that it has been in the past and could be again, though it sometimes works to your advantage. But the House renews itself every 2 years. And so, therefore, if the theory is that the current House Republican majority would return on January 3rd in the House, unless, of course, it's a Sunday and therefore delayed. But at any rate, in the beginning of January, when they return for the next Congress, it is entirely renewed. There is, in fact, momentarily no House seated. And, of course, if it were very close, or there was, in fact, supposed to be a Democratic majority, there wouldn't be a Republican majority to displace that or to challenge the seats of the incoming Democratic majority. And that's true as far as it goes. It would certainly require the cooperation of the clerk of the House. We've been through this before. And, of course, the clerk of the House, while the House doesn't hold over from one Congress to the next and dissolves entirely, the clerk of the House remains in office. And it's just one of those weird paradoxes that they've never really found another way to resolve. So the practice has been to recognize the clerk as continuing in office until replaced later on. However, you could say, well, a previous Congress can't bind a current Congress. True, but otherwise, how do you convene a new House? And it's sort of a concession to reality, and ordinarily not a particularly troublesome one. But in order to pull off the mechanism that the House actually has and has exercised before, that would allow a majority of one party to refuse to seat members of another party, well, it's only happened one or two seats at a time, and with the exception of the Civil War, which, since we may find ourselves in a second Civil War, I guess we ought to hold out as though it's different, an example worth examining. But generally speaking, one, possibly two seats actually challenged at a time, not an entire majority. You should also keep in mind, of course, what if the current House Republican majority was somehow magically, just hypothetically, to continue into the next Congress legally and have the authority to make these decisions? Remember, of course, that it's like a one-vote majority, so it's not by any means guaranteed that they can hold that conference together to pull off what would be necessary. Of course, if it's a total power grab, I suppose Republicans might, in fact, be more interested in that, as it would keep them in power. But not certain that they could put that majority together. And thirdly, I guess I would say, there's really no indication that the current clerk of the House is the kind of person who would go along with this sort of extra-legal power grab. But in all of this, it's sort of, at the last second, when you tell them, all right, I know that the House doesn't continue, but the clerk does. And the clerk has a significant amount of power, most of which is supposed to be ministerial, the election results are returned by the states and the clerk acknowledges them, and that's that. That's the way it works normally. But the clerk's job is to, well, for one thing, prepare the rolls for the opening of the new Congress. They get all those certificates of election, and if they're doing it correctly, they're compiling a list of all the people who should be afforded floor privileges to enter the House to reconstitute the House on its opening day. And that's, not usually, we don't really scrutinize that usually because, of course, the work is, like we said, ministerial. And if they do it correctly and the newspapers report everything correctly and we know who won where and they come up with a completely different list, there would be outrage, and there would be outrage. And it would be illegal, and it would be illegal, and it would be unconstitutional, and it would be unconstitutional. And yet there's the list. I only say this because as people poo-poo the theory, they say, well, you're really talking about just a total upending of the Constitution. And at that point, we have bigger problems. No, that would be the biggest problem that we have. But yeah, it would be an upending of the Constitution. And it would require the clerk of the House to stand in the role of akin to what Trump thought Mike Pence should have done on January 6th. Yes, it would. That's correct. And that's dumb, and you shouldn't expect it. Generally, don't go betting on Kalshi about it. I mean, unless you get fantastic odds and you have risk capital. But anyway, don't bet on it. Don't give them any ideas. Although, too late, I'm giving them the idea. They already had this idea, and they did have it. On January 6th, 2021, you are talking about people who forged electoral college vote certificates and sent them over there and just said, well, if we give these to the vice president, we can just say, read these, and he'll do it. Do you believe the same thing about the clerk of the House? You shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't. As it turns out, we shouldn't have believed it about Mike Pence. But before Mike Pence said, no, I'm not going to do it, and declared his intentions, I don't know that we would have, we could have probably gotten some decent odds on that, on Kalshi, had it existed at the time. And people wondered, it's a bit of a coin toss. Maybe he will do this thing for Trump. Maybe a clerk would do this thing for Trump. They would have to be displacing an awful lot of people. It would be a serious outrage. However, I just want to point out that if you're dismissing that scenario by saying, well, but then the whole Constitution is gone. Yeah, that's right. That's what we're saying. Well, they would never do. I also think it's very unlikely. I also think it won't work. I also think they have convinced themselves before that this is the sort of thing that they could do. If my recollection of the time is correct, and it's probably not, but if my recollection is in the run-up to January 6th, 2021 is correct, I believe that, we read people gaming out this sort of scenario, and in explaining it said, yeah, well, it would come down to one person just declaring the opposite of the truth to be true. But I did say, I don't know how they're going to get, they have to have electoral college vote certificates that say Trump won. And I don't know how I think we acknowledged they could forge them. I don't know if we necessarily said they're going to go through the process of holding their own fake electoral college meetings at state capitals around the country. But if you wanted to fake it, that's how you would do it. But the difficulty we had was the idea of how you're going to get this paper onto the floor. You'd have to have, for instance, the cooperation of the clerk, and I'm not certain you could get it. Well, at any rate, it was a different clerk for one thing. And then they proved, if you forged the things, you could hand them to someone like, Senator Ron Johnson, and he might, in fact, try to bring them to the rostrum, and if not swap the papers out surreptitiously, at least hand them to Pence and say, you know what to do, wink, wink. So could it be done? Sure. Should it be done? Absolutely not. Would they try this? I don't know. I doubt it because it's insane, but they've tried insane things before. And really, if they actually come to believe, if we don't do this, we'll all be thrown in prison. Well, they may be right about that. And who knows what they'd be willing to do. Of course, I guess we'll also throw in there, if you're willing to go to that length, and you want to tip your hat to well, at that point, then there's no constitution, so what the hell? Well, then they could just say, all right, we're taking over, and we brought the army with us, and apparently they believe us, and they're going to install us as in power, and we are ending the Constitution, or at least the parts that are inconvenient. You could also do things that way. It's true. I mean, once you're in outlandish, crazy outlier land, imagine it all, I guess. Anyway, you don't have to imagine that today. Today is Tuesday, which means, of course, that tomorrow will be Wednesday. And although Greg doesn't have to go away in order to come back tomorrow, he's already away. He can return to our air and tell us what elections have taken place. I'm not certain which ones, but you know who does? Taniel, as a Bolts magazine, knows all about this stuff. I did see them quite rightfully giving themselves a pat on the back, or someone else may be patting them on the back, actually, over the weekend, saying these guys are following all of these races that are flying under the radar, and acknowledging, all of these different special elections and this big trend in the over performances, even in places where Democrats don't pull through and actually win. They vastly overperform, and the only people tracking that, I think, are not the only people, but chiefly the writers, and if not the writers, then the readers of Bolts magazine are the only people watching this stuff, and therefore the only ones able to tease out the trend, which I think has been very important in all of this. So, all right, we count down towards the next election. We count down towards the end of this Congress, and later on the end of the Trump era, we hope, forever. And might as well get to the stories of the day for today. And there are an awful lot. I don't know, once again, where to start. We'll begin with Trump saber-rattling with respect to Canada again. The poor Canadians, very much put upon by their neighbors to the south. We've been there before. Of course, it was in the early 19th century, but other than that, since then, things have been pretty cool. They're pretty nice neighbors, although we do have the Olympics and the hockey rivalry heating up, and, things get tense then. But if you can just keep it in the rink, everything should be fine. However, Trump looks to take things elsewhere. I saw last night during the Olympic broadcast an interview with some of the players on the United States women's Olympic hockey team, being interviewed by Stanley Tucci. And I'm not certain how or why that happened, but it's a very interesting trend now. All the celebrities there's always been celebrities in attendance at the Olympics, but they're wrangling themselves very, fun, interesting cameo type working deals where they go to the Olympics and they prepare some segments for the TV broadcast. Snoop Dogg, I guess, chief among them now. I mean, he's actually got himself a job as a, standing NBC commentator on that. I'd love to know how that happened and why I can't make it happen. But he's a much more colorful personality than I am. But now Stanley Tucci is there, and I don't know whether he's getting a free trip out of it because he's doing these segments or what. But anyway, fine with me. It was a fun segment. He interviewed the women on the hockey team. It was an interesting exchange about that, and he asked them. It's a very good. I don't know how closely he follows the women's hockey. He must, because why else would he? I mean, it's an interesting choice. Otherwise, he could be interviewing other stars of the Olympics, figure skaters, downhill skiers, curlers, what have you. And I think he was at that game, and he asked them, who's your toughest opponent or something like that along those lines. And I think he knew the answer even when he asked, and they said Canada. And largely true. It was, and how come? Tell me about that. And it was interesting to watch the players answer. I think they gave an answer that, it could have been refined a little bit, but they're young people and they're athletes and not orators necessarily. But it was interesting to watch them say, Canada is definitely our toughest rival. And one of them, at least, I don't know whether they all agreed, said, we don't like them, or we don't get along with them, or, we just don't like them. And it was an interesting answer. And I think I've seen there's a commercial out there that sort of implies the same thing with respect to the men's hockey team. And it may very well be true. And I don't I'll begrudge them, I guess, their competitive edge. But Stanley Tucci did an interesting thing in conducting the interview. Maybe he's got interview experience now because of the Hunger Games, you see? But he asked them, I mean, this is really a great legitimate question. Yeah, but why? Not, I don't understand it, but what do you really not like personally not like the Canadian players? It's possible. But it was interesting, and they began to sort of revise their answers a little bit. And it really, somebody, brought out a good sportsmanship save saying, we're close rivals and we bring out the best in each other. And that's good. That doesn't answer why you wouldn't like one another, though. Although really the answer probably is, we're all very hyper-competitive people at the top of our sport. I'll say this. It's not that we don't like them, if you want to get out of this. It's that we don't like losing to them and they don't like losing to us. That's what makes it a heated rivalry. And it's not that I hate them personally and wish the Canadian team would die. It's I don't want to lose to them, and that's on my mind, and it's always a possibility because they're very, very good, and vice versa, and we make each other nervous for that reason. So anyway, they didn't get that answer out of them, but it was interesting to watch. So let's all bully Canada. We're up to a new level of crazy, I think, with Trump's latest Truth Social rant, which I won't get to just yet. Oh, maybe we should start with that, and then we'll go to the reality behind the crazy. Did I even park this thing anywhere? I'm pretty sure I must have. But I don't know. I mean, it's sort of buried under so much other stuff. Maybe this is it. Yeah. I had to grab somebody's Blue Sky post because, I'm not on Truth Social or anything like that. And most people if they're using his stuff, they're talking about it and posting a screenshot. Here it is. Alexander Clarkson's not tweet, but Blue Sky post is what I've got. Lecturer for European Politics and History at King's College London. So we were awake at the same time. And he said, if you're wondering why Canadians are nervous, it's never good to become the focus of the mentally unwell ruler of a larger nuclear-armed neighbor. That's true. That's correct. Spelling of neighbor is incorrect, but the thought is there. Anyway, he has taken a screenshot of Donald J. Trump's, what the hell do you call it? Oh, yeah, Truth Social post. Have you seen it? Have you heard it? There's a lot of gobbledygook that tries to be sort of, maybe this is what a president should be thinking about, but then of course it devolves into all the things that should never come out of a president's mouth. As everyone knows, the country of Canada, it is a country, that's usually just say Canada, but the country of Canada has treated the United States very unfairly for decades. Actually, not true at all. Now things are turning around for the USA, and fast. But imagine, Canada is building a massive bridge between Ontario and Michigan. They are, it's true. They own both the Canada and the United States side. And, of course, built it with virtually no U.S. content. They probably wouldn't necessarily need it. And, of course, if the Canadian government was building it, they might want to, contract with Canadian suppliers. They built it. President Barack Hussein Obama stupidly gave them a waiver so they could get around the Buy American Act and not use any American products, including our steel. Now, I don't know what kind of waiver happened or was necessary or whether he just made that up, but I'm pretty sure that the Canadian government won't be, subject to the Buy American Act because they're another country. But I suppose if part of the bridge is being built in the United States, but I'm not clear about who owns the land on either side. If it's in Michigan, you think, all right, well, that's American soil, but we don't really think of it as who owns the land per se in terms of, the United States or Michigan. But okay, anyway, listen. Now the Canadian government expects me, as President of the United States, to permit them to just take advantage of America. What does the United States of America get? Absolutely nothing. Just, more efficient commerce and transportation. Ontario won't even put U.S. spirits, beverages, and other alcoholic products on their shelves because they hate you. I mean, Don't forget why that's happening. They are absolutely prohibited from doing so. And now, on top of everything else, Prime Minister Carney wants... by the way, they are absolutely prohibited from doing so. Well, then stop prohibiting them. Oh, that's... no, they voluntarily don't want to have any American products on their shelves. Sometimes it's a matter of policy of the stores, but... because you keep threatening to make them the 51st state. What a great joke that was. That's so funny that they won't cooperate with us economically now, and they're our biggest trading partner. Great line, sir. Anyway, now the Prime Minister wants to make a deal with China, which will eat Canada alive. Now we're getting to the crazy part. We'll just get the leftovers. I don't think so. The first thing... well, then don't worry about it if you don't think so. Oh, I see. The first thing China will do... ready for this? Is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada and permanently eliminate the Stanley Cup. I mean, did he think, what do I know about Canada? What would China change about Canada? They love hockey. There's a kind of donut and coffee they particularly enjoy. I don't know the name of it. Tim Hortons, is that? I don't know. Horton Hears a Who will not be allowed. You can't read that to your kids. So that's right. The Chinese are going to come in and eliminate all hockey and the Stanley Cup. The tariffs Canada charges us for our dairy products, blah, 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 blah. So now off into tariff land. After just casually dropping, China's going to take over Canada and outlaw hockey, which they play in the Olympics, I think. I don't know how great they are at it, but there you go. Why would they do it? I don't know. The tariffs, something, the charges for our dairy products for many years have been unacceptable, putting our farmers at great financial risk. Well, okay. When we come back, we'll get to, I guess, the New York Times version of the reality behind, well, what's up with this bridge? Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. Patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, $1 crisp bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. Patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I own both sides of this break, and so therefore it's very unfair to the United States of America. So there's apparently some reality behind all this. I don't think there's is there anything else super crazy that we have to be in there? Nothing that rises to the level of Canada eliminating all hockey inside, or China eliminating all hockey inside of Canada. But he goes on to say, by the way, because something, and therefore dairy products having a tariff. That's the one tariff he can remember. Not everybody can remember all of them, but I guess that's the last one he remembers. So we had that milk thing, and remember, I'm very strong because I drink whole milk and something, blah, blah, blah. Remember all of that? Anyway, he then goes on to say, basically, until I will not allow this bridge to open until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them, which is what? No one knows. And also, importantly, Canada treats the United States with the fairness and respect that we deserve. Oh, please, don't limit it to that. Give us a little more than we actually deserve. We will start negotiations immediately with all that we have given them. We should own, perhaps, at least 1/2 of this asset. The revenues generated because of the U.S. market will be astronomical. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Yargle Bargle, President Donald J. Trump. And so there you go. Let's see. Oh, I have some notes here. This just in. Or maybe it's just in. This just noticed. Anyway, it came in half an hour ago. But Scott has notes. At the time, the Republican-led Michigan legislature refused to fund half of the project. So that could be part of the problem. Snyder helped forge a deal in which Canada paid to build the bridge and the U.S. Customs Plaza, and expects to recoup its investment through vehicle tolls. So, okay, there you go. What do we go? So is Canada recouping its investment that way through to? Okay, so they're going to, impose a tariff. Oh no, that's impossible. Anyway, Donald Trump is mad about not owning something and says, I'm going to grab it. It belongs to me now. And it's not clear that he's got any particular authority to do anything, but that won't stop him from trying. And if we now say, all right, well, instead of listening to crazy president, have a tantrum about what he thinks he can do, let's have the New York Times whitewash and sane wash the whole thing and tell us what they think the president should think he could do, even if it's not actually true. Trump threatens to block opening of new bridge to Canada. That's the title of the piece. Seems apt. So far, so good. It's an excellent title. I mean, seems to describe what's there. You might wish for, and he can't do that. But that's not the sort of thing that the New York Times puts in headlines. The Gordie Howe International Bridge. How international? Extremely international. There are two nations connected by this bridge, and that's the very definition of international. But of course, they're speaking of hockey great Gordie Howe. But of course, no, they're not, because China has banned hockey in Canada, and it's now the Xi Jinping International Bridge of Peace. All right. The Gordie Howe International Bridge, expected to open early this year, and it is early this year right now. It was built by Canada to ease cargo transport between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario. And Windsor, Ontario should change its name now so that it's not associated with the not Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor or whatever they're calling him now. I think there's a Windsor in there, is there not? If not, then everything's fine, and you can just keep Windsor, Ohio. Yeah, move it to Ohio. Why not? Windsor, Ontario. I beg your pardon. Sorry, eh? Okay, Chris Cameron and Vyosa Isai. Do I have that name anywhere near correct? I don't believe I've run into this writer before, but Toronto-based, Vyosa, V-J-O-S-A. Last name is, I'm guessing, Isai, I-S-A-I. But no one wants to talk about AI. Isai. So, I don't know. My apologies if we got it wrong. See if we can figure it out in the next couple of days. President Trump threatened on Monday to block the opening of a new bridge between the United States and Canada if Canadian officials did not address a long and growing list of grievances. That's the case with dealing with Trump for everything. Escalating diplomatic tensions between the two countries amid a trade war and a deepening rift between the United States and its northern neighbor, which will only be exacerbated by hockey contests, I'm sure, provided they don't ban hockey. Mr. Trump said that he would, quote, not allow the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, scheduled to open early this year for traffic between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario, until the United States is fully compensated. Oh, we're sane washing it, so I'm doing it in my voice. Until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them, herpes, whatever else we might have given them along COVID, for one other thing, of course. But and also importantly, Canada treats the United States with fairness and respect that we deserve. Oh yeah, right, that stuff. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the nation's largest business lobbying group, denounced the president's threat in a statement, writing that whether this proves real or simply threatened to keep uncertainty high, blocking or barricading bridges is a self-defeating move. It's not entirely clear whether he means, some physical blockade of the thing, or, I suppose there might be some leverage somewhere that there could be some licensing issues with the, toll plaza and collection. Who knows what he could find to use for this, but for that matter, he could. Can I make a suggestion? I order Pete Hegseth to lie across, oncoming traffic and block the trucks. Could we do that? I wouldn't mind that. for the risk. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce is mad about it and says he can't do it. It was not immediately clear how Mr. Trump would block the opening of the bridge. Its construction was paid for by Canada, and a public-private arrangement under which Canada and Michigan would jointly operate the crossing gives Michigan part ownership. So what's the problem? It doesn't give Trump part ownership. One possible avenue would be for Mr. Trump to declare an emergency. This is important, and it becomes important for the news of the day. I'll show you how in just a minute. Declaring an emergency. How? Why? The same way he's declared all sorts of emergencies having to do with immigration, by not having an emergency, but saying, if the president says it's an emergency, it's an emergency. And I'm the president. And okay, so there you go. It's an emergency. Hasn't held up very well in all cases, but it's done the job in at least a few areas. And whenever there's anything international involved, courts tend to jump out of the way. So we'll see. So he could declare an emergency. Under the law, Customs and Border Protection. Those guys are fair-minded and square dealers. They can temporarily close a port of entry when necessary to respond to a specific threat to human life or national interests. And you know how Trump will interpret that. Of course, it's in our national interest to give Donald Trump ownership of this bridge. It just is. And also, there is a threat to human life. I will kill any Canadian that tries to get across here without paying Trump. Mr. Trump has often invoked emergency statutes for events and circumstances that are largely considered routine to make use of the expanded authority that doing so grants him. It's a very, matter-of-fact way of stating it, but it happens to be true. He keeps trying to do this, and it's not a good idea in general. The nearby Ambassador Bridge, one of the busiest border crossings on the continent, has been privately owned for decades by a Detroit trucking industry billionaire and his family. I don't know how they pronounce it, Maroons. It's morons with a U in it. You moron. Like that. That's how you can remember how it's spelled. Or if you thought that a British person was spelling the word morons, and if I, told you, how do you think the British spell morons? You would spell it this way, M-O-R-O-U-N-S. But I think they actually spell it the same way. But you would be a maroon, I guess, for thinking so. But there you go. The Detroit trucking industry billionaires. And if the downside of becoming a billionaire family was, you got to live with the last name of moron, do it. It's worth billions of dollars. No one will know anyway, except occasionally when the moron in chief looks to close rival bridges. So the family had, in fact, previously called on Mr. Trump to halt the construction of the Gordie Howe Bridge, which would, once opened, compete for the more than $300 million in daily cross-border trade over the Ambassador Bridge. So they have a monopoly, or more or less a controlling interest, certainly, in the trade that crosses in the area, and they wanted to keep it. And who better to appeal to than Donald Trump in a situation like that? Normally, a president would say, well, I'm sorry, either I can't pick winners and losers, or I thought I just gave a big speech and you did too about how competition is great for everything or whatever, and everybody wins when there's competition. But of course, monopolists don't really care for that. It's just a PR message for them. So they've been begging Trump to block this opening, and now he's looking for an excuse. Mr. Trump also suggested in his social media post on Monday that the United States might seek to acquire, quote, at least one half, unquote, of the new bridge, and to get a cut of the revenue from bridge tolls, which I'm sure Michigan probably thought that it was going to take because of the way the deal was negotiated. And what's wrong with that, I'm not really sure. But he wants some of that money. But of course, he wants to acquire at least one half of a lot of things, including Venezuela and Greenland, too. In his first term, Mr. Trump had promoted the project in a joint statement with Canadian officials as a symbol of the country's deep economic partnership and as, quote, a vital economic link between our two countries. But the president's threat to block the bridge's opening is in keeping with a larger pressure campaign to force the Canadian government to capitulate to his demands, in addition to threatening to annex Canada as the 51st state. And really, is there any reason why you should look elsewhere for other threats? I mean, that's kind of the ultimate one. But in addition to that, Mr. Trump has waged an expansive and expensive trade war against his northern neighbor. It's not his, it's ours. Levying tariffs and threatening other economic sanctions. It is possible that Mr. Trump may not follow through on his threat to block the bridge. It's worth acknowledging. Or that he may take a less severe action to avoid the most serious economic repercussions. Mr. Trump has previously delayed or walked back implementing tariffs that had the potential to disrupt American trade and cripple domestic industries. Mr. Trump made a similarly alarming statement last month that appeared to threaten to ground all Canadian-built aircraft currently flying in the United States. Do you remember that? It was only like a week ago. Over a regulatory dispute. But air industry regulators quickly clarified his statement was meant to apply only to new aircraft certifications and that air travel would not be disrupted by the president's threat. But it was the broadest possible threat. He said, we'll decertify all airplanes built in Canada, which would include, he was targeting the Bombardier company, which apparently now concentrates mostly on private jets, but I recognize the brand name. There's a lot of Bombardier airliner jets flying regional routes all over the United States. Every time I get on a flight that's moving regionally, very frequently we'll see that I'm on a Bombardier, and that's a Canadian company. And although apparently they sold off that division and it may be the division now resides somewhere other than Canada, the threat was against all Canadian-made aircraft, and those were made in Canada before the spinoff of that thing. So you'd be talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of flights grounded every day, chaos in the system, American commerce grinding to a halt. All right, fine. We'll do something different. I'll back off my threat. Even though he would never acknowledge such a thing. Mr. Trump's attacks against Canada increased in intensity after remarks last month by the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Not too far from, I guess, where the Olympics are. I don't know. It's probably the other side of Switzerland, but Switzerland's relatively small. So it's in the, that whole area where it's snowy and cold, in which he urged leaders of middle-sized nations to band together to resist Trump's America First doctrine and his efforts to dismantle the post-World War II international order. Mr. Carney's office declined to comment on Mr. Trump's threat to block the bridge's opening. Stacey LaRouche, a spokeswoman for Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, there we are, finally the governor is in this, downplayed the president's threat, saying in a statement that the bridge was, quote, going to open one way or another, and the governor looks forward to attending the ribbon cutting. Maybe that's all Trump wants. He wants to be invited to the ribbon cutting. Drew Dilkins, the mayor of Windsor, said on Monday evening that he was stunned but not surprised by the president's threat. That's the right kind of answer. This is crazy stuff, said Mr. Dilkins. He added that the bridge's delayed opening last fall had raised concerns of Trump administration involvement. So it's already been pushed back once. Mr. Trump's aggressive stance against Canada since returning to office has infuriated its government, enraged its citizens, and significantly harmed economic ties between the two countries. Canadians, who have historically formed a large share of international tourists in the United States, are boycotting U.S. travel destinations. And they can't get here because the bridge is closed. And imported U.S. products as well. In his meandering social media post, Mr. Trump complained, among other grievances, that Ontario won't even put U.S. spirits, beverages, and other alcoholic products on its shelves. Mr. Trump, in his post on Monday, also repeated an unfounded claim, that's it, just unfounded, that if Canada aligned itself with China, the first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada. That's just an insult to Canadians. Well, what would they care about? They're going to ban all the hockey and maple syrup. Think of something else. Anyway, So, okay, it's an unfounded claim. That's true. Mr. Trump has previously claimed that China seeks to, quote, end ice hockey in Canada. So this is not even the first time he did that, apparently, without elaborating on what he meant. Well, that's because, can you elaborate on that? Yes, I can. Thank you. It's, there's a little bit more. I also wanted to say cuckoo. There's no elaborating on what it meant, but I wanted to now click on this link, previously claiming that China will end ice hockey. This is from, previously, by a couple of days, I guess. February 2nd, the Toronto Sun has Donald Trump warns China will, quote, end ice hockey in Canada. Why? I mean, I'm a little curious to see if there's anything equally dumb or funnier behind it. But I mean, I guess I just think that's meant to make Canadians nervous, but I think they're smarter than that. So anyway, the auto manufacturing industries in the two countries are linked by the Ambassador Bridge, where auto parts go back and forth across the border daily. Manuel Maroon, who bought the Ambassador Bridge in 1979, and I mean, gosh, there was such a great time back then when you could buy international bridges. That was an interesting. And by the way, I mean, I wonder who sold it. I'm just a little bit curious. Like, this guy's name is Moron. Hey, I have a bridge to sell you. All right. I don't know. Manuel Maroon. I don't know. Manuel, really. Manuel bought the bridge in 1979. I'll take it. And then he got it. So who's the moron, really? He had battled the Canadian government to prevent it from building a second bridge. I'm going to just go with the moron family because it's funny. Had also attempted to force the Canadian government to authorize an expansion that would add more lanes to the Ambassador Bridge. So they really just wanted to stay in control and make more money. I would say who could blame them, but I could. So you probably could too. Major construction on the Gordie Howe International Bridge is complete, and engineers have been in the testing phase for months. I've driven from one end to the other. So far, so good. Good test. That all according to the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, a government-funded corporation, which government, I don't know, that is managing the bridge's construction and future operation. The authority did not respond to a request for comment. A highway expansion leading to the new bridge, which cost the Canadian government more than $1 billion US, that's like 75 billion Canadian dollars, was completed a decade ago. So only 65 billion. The bridge is named after Gordie Howe, the Canadian hockey legend who played largely for the Detroit Red Wings. So it's it's an international symbol there, and often went elbows up on opponents. The phrase has become a rallying cry for Canadians opposing aggressive actions by the United States in Mr. Trump's second term. So now we're all mad about that. Well, he used to fight, and they're using that phrase, and I don't know. Anyway, that's where things now stand with threatening Canada. I think you just have to be aware of that. There's a million other things happening, but I said there was a connection to what the hell were we connecting to? There was something about process that we were talking about earlier, and I said that there was a connection to the news today. Now I've already lost track of this, but I remember that the story I wanted to bring up was parked here in today's whip notice from Catherine Clark, the Democratic whip in the House, that comes through email and alerts everybody to what votes are taking place. Yes, right. Emergency powers and the declaration of national emergencies in order to unleash additional powers for Donald Trump. Never a good idea. It has a tangent into today's proceedings on the House floor. So the whip's nightly preview lets us know that, it's about time really for the House to convene for morning hour business. Legislative business begins at 12. First votes approximately 1:30 p.m. in case you were wondering how rigorous their voting schedule is. Last vote considered to probably arrive approximately 2 o'clock p.m. So you heard it here. I did tell you what the schedule is. Morning hour at 10, legislative business at 12, about an hour and a half of debating things before they actually have to start voting at 1:30. But they're going to wrap up that voting by about 2 o'clock. In other words, not a whole lot on their plate for today. What's up? A rule providing for the consideration of a couple of different bills, doing them all under one rule. H.R. 3617, Securing America's Critical Minerals Supply Act, and that may or may not have any bearing on the Greenland situation. H.R. 261, Undersea Cable Protection Act of 2025. That could rope Greenland in as well. I'm not sure if it's an all Greenland day. And H.R. 2189, Law Enforcement Innovate to De-Escalate Act. Well, what is that? Law Enforcement, LEI, Innovate to De-Escalate Act. I don't know if it's meant to be an acronym or just a fun rhyme. Innovate to De-Escalate Act. Okay, well, the usual recommendation on a rule written by Republicans, vote no. Not just because it will authorize the debate on bills that we might think are stupid under stupid conditions, but there's another reason. By the way, in terms of what these bills are, there's very brief descriptions here. But at any rate, if they do adopt the rule, then they're going to start with the actual consideration of these bills, starting with the Securing America's Critical Minerals Supply Act, which they also recommend you vote no on. The rule will provide for 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled, or divided if you prefer. Nothing unusual about the style of debate for any of these bills. Here's the unusual part. A little notice given here in bold in the whip's notice. Members are advised that the rule pauses the 15-day clock by which resolutions related to various national emergencies, right, could become privileged for consideration on the floor. The emergency declarations referenced in the rules include Ranking Member Meeks's resolutions that would have otherwise ripened on Wednesday being tomorrow. Ripened, of course, meaning that the time has come for them to be recognized by rule as privileged if they raise this issue on the floor. What's going on here? Well, let me jump back to Blue Sky here. I'm pretty sure I saw Ringwis talking about this, and I had to forward this to Greg yesterday. But let's see, where is it? There, he had grabbed some of the language out of the rule. And let's see, how come it's not immediately apparent here? I feel like this would have been just in the last, there we are, Ringwis grabbing the language of this rule, which reads, because this is the sort of thing that Greg loves, when they mess with the calendars. Inside the text of this rule, a section 4, which reads, each day during the period from February 10th, 2026, that's today, through July 31st, 2026, shall not constitute a calendar day for each. So each day from here through the end of July should not be considered a calendar day for purposes of Section 202 of the National Emergencies Act, which you'll find at Title 50, United States Code, Section 1622. So each day from here through the end of July won't be a day, at least not for the purposes of Section 202 of the National Emergencies Act with respect to a joint resolution terminating a national emergency declared by the President on February 1st, 2025. But not just that one. How many times has the President declared a national emergency in order to grab at extra power? Well, 4 of them are named here: February 1st, 2025, April 2nd, 2025, July 30th, 2025, or, and in this case, because it's a list of how many times he did it, and August 6th, 2025. So there are 4 instances that they may be all such instances. There may be others, I don't know. But Congress has the ability, after a certain period of time, after a certain number of calendar days have passed since the declaration of a national emergency by the President, the Congress can offer a privileged resolution to declare an end to that national emergency, even if the president won't do it themselves. But you have to wait a certain number of calendar days before such a motion would be ripe for consideration by the House. But as we've told you before, they can manipulate time itself. I don't have an echo effect. I think I should. Maybe I do. I have to find it somewhere. But one of Greg's favorite things, if you're running out of time, just declare that time has frozen, or declare that as days pass in the real world, we will just simply declare them under the rules not to have passed in the United States Congress, so that you can't bring up the motion to declare an end to the fake national emergency declaration that Trump declared at this point last year. So there you go. That's what's in part of this rule. They just will simply declare the calendar to have frozen. Ringwis prints that and says, by the way, I find this funny. 4 months is okay. 6 months is too far. What do they think is going to happen in January? Apparently there was further language in Section 3, which says that, apparently a previous rule, House Resolution 707, I don't remember when they dealt with that, but it was agreed. Well, now here's the answer. Agreed to on September 16th of 2025. Sections 9, 10, and 11 of that resolution are hereby amended by striking March 31st, 2026 and inserting January 31st, 2026. Apparently they did this before, and now they regret the length of time for which they froze the calendar. A 6-month freeze is now 4 months into it. Too much for them to accept, and they want now instead for it only to last 4 months. I'm not certain why. Neither is Ringwis. Nobody is really sure why they're doing this, but there you have it. If those 6 Republicans don't like the provisions suspending expedited procedures rate tariffs, wouldn't it make more sense to just vote against the previous question and try to amend the rule? Yes, it would. We'll talk a little bit about that on our return in a minute. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Just a minute has passed. We froze the calendar, and you could pretend this minute didn't happen if you want to. Some weedy stuff right at the end. I mean, the whole thing was a little bit weedy, but the weedy stuff we're talking about, Ringwis was grabbing a Blue Sky posting here from, oh boy, okay, we've gone off onto a different tangent here, but that's all right. Let me back up again and find out where we left things. Right. Here's the comment from John Bresnahan, who I recognize as what? Is one of the, he's the Punch Bowl guy? Is that right? And this looks to have been screenshotted from Twitter and transported over here. That Don Bacon, among a few other Republicans, has said that he is inclined to vote against the rule tomorrow, which is now today, over the tariff issue. House GOP leaders face a difficult path in passing the rule, as they do with just about everything, because they have a 1-vote majority, or now 2-vote majority, perhaps. Anyway, Bacon had been quoted as saying, look, this will be the 4th time that this rule vote putting a gag on tariff debates has been done. So in other words, you remember, it's the national emergency that we have in mind here is the one that Trump declared in order to arrogate to himself, the power to unilaterally impose his tariff scheme. Ordinarily, no, that's something that Congress would have to do. But in an emergency, the president can do these things. And one of the things, that it's one of the checks and balances on it is Congress can say, look, if this is a fake emergency, or we think the emergency is abated, but he doesn't, we can still repeal the emergency, essentially. So that's what they were looking to do, to remove the power of the president to continue this stupid tariff scheme. But they keep putting it off by saying not enough calendar days have passed in order for you to bring this to the floor as a privileged resolution. They have, of course, but they just keep saying, in Congress, we declare that they have not. And then apparently they've done this 4 times, and some people are getting fed up with this. It'll be the fourth time this rule vote putting a gag on tariff debates has been done. I don't think tariffs are good for the economy, manufacturing jobs, and ag industry, I guess he's saying. It says capitalized AG industry. I don't think it's the attorney general industry, though there is one in this country. American consumers pay the tariffs, and thus it is a big tax. I support giving these authorities back to Congress, says Republican member Don Bacon, and apparently there are another 5 along with them. And Ringwis is pointing out that there's no particular need to take the whole rule down. Remember, the rule does do some other things that, generally speaking, Republicans at least would agree with. I mean, Democrats would have no interest necessarily in passing the rule because they don't probably support the underlying legislation that this rule sets debate parameters for. But if you're Don Bacon and you otherwise support the legislation that will later be debated but don't want to do another gag rule on the tariffs, there's something you can do. You don't have to just vote no on the whole rule. You can instead vote no on the previous question. That's the motion that the House uses to end debate. It's, I guess, in that sense, similar to cloture rules, except, of course, you're not closing unlimited debate. You're closing debate an hour at a time. But if you vote against the previous question, what it does is open up another hour of debate under standard House rules, during which the special rule governing the parameters of debate of the bills you want to bring up, is open for debate and amendment. And what you can do is, if you vote against the previous question and you go into an extra hour of debate, you propose. I propose that we simply strike Section 4 of the rule, and if you do that, you'll get my vote. And if they then go ahead and do that, then they would be able to bring the bill, the rule to the floor again and vote on it and consider all of the bills that they were scheduled to consider today, but not have this crazy time travel, time freezing amendment in the bill. And then they'd finally tomorrow be able to bring a measure to the floor that would end the so-called national emergency that authorizes the president's unilateral powers with respect to taxing everybody for everything, which normally would be, interesting and important to, Republicans in this country. So there you go. Just wanted to update you on the fact that was happening, and it's one of Greg's favorite moves. We may even talk about it a little bit more tomorrow if it comes to his attention that, we're actually dealing with, oh no, this crap again. Yeah, it does come up from time to time. All right, other dumb things are happening, and boy, are there plenty of them. And a lot of them have to do with the economy, stupid, or the stupid economy, depending on how you look at it. Trump is out there promising dumb things again. We just got done explaining how dumb the promise of Trump RX turned out to be. And now the entire economy is what's at stake. At the root of this is Trump announcing, I have a Bloomberg piece here that I may or may not be able to read, but Trump announcing, of course, he's mentioned before, he wants someone else other than Jerome Powell when Powell's term as Fed chief, right, chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, comes open when his term ends in May, I think. So, all right, he's as president's, despite the fact that he shouldn't be president, he is allegedly president. He gets to nominate someone else for the job, and he's picked someone. And that someone is absolutely 100% in the Epstein files. You should know that as well. And it's unclear whether Trump was caught by surprise by this person being in the Epstein files or picked him because he is in the Epstein files and the Epstein file boys stick together on things. Do not know the answer to that. Probably the second one. Anyway, his pick is, I don't remember the guy's name, but it's Warsh is his last name. Like some people used to say, maybe if you speak to someone who's from Baltimore about how you might clean your hands, you wash them in Wooter. That's really more Philadelphia, the Wooter thing. But anyway, that accent creeps up and down between Philadelphia and Baltimore. as they say. So I can't read you this on browser view, but and Bloomberg may be one of those things that like is actually quite difficult to open in Instapaper, but there may or may not be a workaround here. But the point is that one, that'll tell me what the guy's name is. Warsh. Dang, I can't. All right, so we'll Federal Reserve. We'll just go and get this. You may already know the guy's name because maybe you read about him in the pedophile files. Yeah, Kevin M. Warsh is his name. Wikipedia will tell me a little bit about him. He's an American financier and bank executive, served as member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors from 2006 to 2011. So he's got some experience behind him. During and in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, it is next noted, Warsh acted as the central bank's primary liaison to Wall Street and served as the Federal Reserve's representative to the Group of 20, the G20, and as the board's emissary to the emerging and advanced economies in Asia. Prior to this, he served as special assistant to the president for economic policy and executive secretary of the White House National Economic Council under President George W. Bush. So it's not that he's being picked from out of nowhere or anything. And I imagine that he probably found himself like embarrassed to be at the other end of this promise. But the Bloomberg, the reason I picked the Bloomberg article is it carried this headline, and it just happened to be the most conveniently placed one that I saw. Trump says Fed pick Warsh can get economy to hit 15% growth. Well, no. No one can. I don't think. I mean, it's not that it's an impossible thing to happen. It's just that it's never happened. So that doesn't mean it's impossible. But there's no reason to believe that it would happen now or certainly under this regime of tariffs, for one thing. And here's why. Let's see. Here's a couple of blue sky comments that seem to encapsulate things. Here's the Bloomberg article that I saw. Tim O'Brien posted it. Is Tim O'Brien a Bloomberg guy? Yeah, he's the senior executive editor of Bloomberg. So he shared with us this paywalled article, but that's what Bloomberg is about. And his comment, though, about, I don't know whether he wrote this article or not, and I don't think Bloomberg's display will even tell us that. The paywall blocks who wrote it, which I think, again, they should renegotiate in their contracts. But Tim O'Brien says things like this, Trump saying that you can get 15% growth. Well, these are the things you say when you know nothing about economies, economics, and or economic growth, but you're freaked out about the midterm elections. That's essentially what Tim O'Brien thinks is going on here. He may be right about that. More context from Kevin Cruz, who provides us with a chart. That's right, a chart, which you can't see, but you can if you follow the link to see his Blue Sky post. But to put it in visual terms, imagine how far off the chart 15% would be if you could see the chart. Now, if you could see the chart, you would see that beginning in 2000 and running all the way through 2023, the last year of the chart, the largest measure of economic growth in all of that time, by the way, 2021, what happened then? Oh, they ended the Trump presidency and began the Biden presidency. 5.8% growth. Now, that's coming out of the worst economic year of COVID, 2020, when the economy, by the way, contracted by 2.2%, a 2.2% shrinkage, I guess you would say, of the economy. By the way, the only one of two negative years in that space, 2000 to 2023, an almost 25-year span. Only 2020 and 2009, immediately following the 2008 financial crisis, were contractions, both contractions 2.6% in 2009, 2.2% in 2020. And And then, of course, rebounding to a 5.8% increase, growth in 2021. By far the largest measure of growth, the next largest being 4.1% growth in 2000. So basically, you're talking about 4.1, 1.0, 1.7, 2.8, 3.8, 3.5, 2.8, 2.0. Now 2008, when the crash happens, 0.1% growth. It's still growth. The damage is done or reflected in the next year, 2009, where it's negative 2.6%. And then, fluctuating between 1 and 3% growth with the one spike of 5.8. It's a very obvious spike. It's a good deal higher than any other node on this chart. And so Trump says, I can triple that next year or some year in the future if I just get my fellow Epstein files guy in charge over at the Fed. Unlikely, to say the least. But as Tim O'Brien is pointing out, Trump is panicking about the midterms. Not entirely sure. He heard earlier in the show how unlikely it is that he might be able to get Republicans back in place in Congress so that they can manipulate, if not the outcome of the vote, then the way the vote is interpreted. And that's the part that I think the smart people are sort of missing. They keep pointing to the fact that, well, states certify the elections. Yes, and that doesn't mean anything. A certification usually means you get to go to Washington, D.C. and be sworn in with no problem, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's not self-executing or automatic. How do you turn a certification into being a member of Congress? And the answer is all of that happens under a Republican clerk, no matter what the outcome of the election is in November. It all happens under a Republican. A crazy Republican, then you have problems. Not a crazy Republican, you have different problems. But you might end up with a Democratic Congress on the other side of those problems. Anyway, there you go. 15% growth is being promised, essentially. By the way, Trump also saying, I'm also going to do a 10% tax cut between now and the midterms. Like he doesn't even disguise it. He says what the end point is. It's going to be, the midterms. So wink, wink. That's what the tax cut is about. It's going to be a middle class tax cut, 10%. Whether or not he's able to deliver on anything, no one knows. But why he's making these promises, everyone knows. Okay. Other items necessary for consideration today. There are lots. I mentioned to you yesterday in our reading about the Atlanta raid on the Fulton County elections system by the FBI, that there was one other item of background information which we had glossed over that I'd like to have more detail on, and I'll be reading here from Adam Lynch's article over at Alternet. Trump administration fired the Atlanta FBI chief prior to all of this for refusal to carry out that election raid, according to reports. MS Now Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian, we hear his name all the time, is now reporting, and in fact was reporting back on January 30th, that President Donald Trump's administration's seizure of Fulton County, Georgia's election records may be either more flimsy or more political than proclaimed. We know the backstory about where the subpoena came from and the fact that they had to go to the Eastern District of Missouri to get it. But there's more. Two people familiar with the matter tell MS Now News that the special agent in charge of the FBI's Atlanta field office, Paul Brown, was forced out of that job earlier January over qualms about and refusal to carry out those searches and seizures in Fulton County. How do you like that? On Wednesday, way back towards the end of January, members of the FBI, of course, raided the Fulton County Election Hub and Operations Center, carrying away records from an election that happened 5 years ago, which President Donald Trump lost to former President Joe Biden, even though the judicial nominees today will not say that clearly. That loss was one of the few national elections in modern history where a Democrat beat a Republican in the formerly deep red state of Georgia. Several opinions on the matter argue that the actual case for Donald Trump's loss 5 years ago is a flimsy argument for the administration to make. Speculation suggests the raid could be the work of Trump's politicized FBI, laboring to make the president feel better about losing the election. Other opinions argue that the administration is chasing ulterior motives for taking the information and trying to build a case, no matter how weak. Georgia attorney Michael J. Moore characterized the raid as an effort by the federal government to control elections, saying that's been a goal of this administration for some time. The statute of limitations for federal crimes, typically 5 years, he added, saying the time to investigate the suspicion of election fraud theft has expired. Atlanta Journal-Constitution senior political columnist Patricia Murphy, meanwhile, agreed that the raid is about the next elections, who will control them in Fulton County in 2026, and who will run them in Georgia 2 years after that, when the 2028 presidential election takes place. Elections in Georgia's extremely blue Fulton County are currently handled by the Fulton County Election Board, like they are everywhere else in the country. But Republican state lawmakers passed a new voting law that gives the Republican-dominated Georgia state election boards the power to replace any so-called, quote, underperforming county election board. Replacement is possible in the event of an audit or investigation. As a side note, the state election board now includes 3 Republican members whom Trump infamously singled out in 2024 as pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory, Murphy said. And 2 of the so-called pit bulls were on site with the FBI in Union City during that raid, Murphy added. So, worth noting, and noting the dismissal of the FBI special agent in charge ahead of the game. So I think we knew all of that as background, but I thought I would put that on the record because it seems important to get a fuller picture of what's going on there. Let's see. Maybe now we can expand on this and save. There are more Epstein developments that we really need to note. The thing's never going to end, and the story has tremendous legs. But we're in the phase now where members of Congress are taking advantage of the ability to review what are supposedly unredacted copies of the Epstein files. But you have to go to the DOJ building, and I guess you get like half an hour to review things, and you can't take anything with you or make any copies, but you can see the unredacted versions of things. And there are people who are interested in doing this. And not just Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, but several other members. As a matter of fact, I know I said I was going to go in a different direction, and I am. But I wanted to acknowledge the video circulating of Vermont Congresswoman Becca Balint. Is it Balint or Balint? Balint. And, well, she had a quote that ordinarily we can't, put on the air, but I will, rather than playing the video, which will only ruin things, although it is kind of interesting to hear her say it, would I be able to engineer it such that I could actually do the bleep? Probably not. Anyway, she's being interviewed by Drop Site News shortly after reviewing more unreleased and unredacted Epstein files. Well, I'll put it this way. They asked her, so what do you think? What did you read? What did you find out? And she said, they're all a bunch of sick fucks. How do you like that? I think we made that. I like the way I do that. You just start the beginning of the word, give the censorship horn, and then add the end of the word. There's no timing necessary. Sick Fs is, that's what she was saying. And I mean, that's, she chuckles a little bit afterward, basically can't believe that she actually, said what she said, but she backed it up and says, I got a chance to read this stuff. And the thing that's really, it's just disgusting. And she says, now everybody knew. And I mean, we've always known that everybody knew because we knew. But when did everybody know? At the important juncture that makes most of their actions highly suspect, if not part of an ongoing criminal cover-up. Lots more about that. Lots more being discovered. And Julie K. Brown, who, led the nation in uncovering most of this stuff, has a new piece that is also extremely important, that has a new piece of the puzzle that I think will be mined for more leverage in the days to come. But as I said, for the moment, I wanted to stick to the Georgia thing and read you this thing from ProPublica, a new name to add to the rogues gallery here, people to watch. Doug Bach-Clark is the writer at ProPublica who put this together, not the guy you need to watch to see if he's done anything illegal or unconstitutional. But make sure he doesn't, while you're monitoring. Kevin Moncla is the person, I guess, that we're looking at here. Moncla, and I don't believe I'm familiar with the name, but I'm sure his background will sound familiar. The conservative researcher being linked to the FBI's seizure of election records in Georgia. Yes, let's find out about that. Kevin Moncla, Moncla, has tried repeatedly to prove that the 2020 vote in Fulton County, Georgia was tainted by fraud. So far without success in several tries, but yet I don't know his name. While state election overseers have rejected his claims, his work may be fueling the federal government's ongoing investigations. That means we got to find out about it. A conservative researcher whose theories, and what does that even mean? Conservative researcher, I don't know. Let's find out. His theories have often been rejected by Georgia election overseers who once pleaded guilty, by the way, to a misdemeanor charge of voyeurism, which doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with this kind of research, you wouldn't think, but who knows? Maybe he's in the Epstein files. Anyway, he's emerging as a central figure in the investigation that culminated in the FBI's shocking seizure of 2020 election records from Fulton County, Georgia, in late January. And I guess I need to add, by way of context, and I don't know why, I don't see anything immediately parked in Instapaper about it, but the word is that the courts are working their way through this and have at least temporarily frozen the ability of, allegedly, the Trump administration to utilize the so-called evidence they think they seized. In other words, saying, yeah, this stuff was seized illegally. It's been very interesting. And another tangent that we could go on is I watched over the weekend a reporter reviewing for the first time the body cam footage of the FBI agents who made the seizure. And it's very interesting. And it's very interesting knowing, as we do, that we had read the claims early on that the first warrant that they showed up with was actually deficient and they had to go back to the magistrate and get it redone. It's just that much more interesting given that there's body cam footage of the FBI people being very condescending with the Fulton County sheriff's officers, deputies on the scene, just doing routine guard duty there at the building, who ask for the warrant. And then I guess they're like, you don't need to see the warrant. And you people don't understand how warrants even work. And then it turns out that they were there with a deficient warrant. But I imagine the body cam footage that was being presented was just the presentation of the second warrant. Anyway, back to, what's his name? Kevin Moncla. What's going on with this guy? This researcher, Kevin Moncla, has tried repeatedly to prove that the 2020 vote in Fulton County was tainted by fraud. Although many of his claims have been discredited or debunked, they've continued to be cited by President Donald Trump and those connected to Cleta Mitchell. Remember her? She was on that phone call to Brad Raffensperger, a lawyer who helped Trump try to overturn the 2020 election and publicly pressed his administration to reinvestigate it. Last week, Moncla told ProPublica that he'd been interviewed twice by, quote, investigators, attorneys of various offices who work on behalf of the U.S. government, unquote. That leaves it a little unclear, regarding his claims that proof of fraud could be found in Fulton County's 2020 voting records. He said he provided them with data backing complaints he's filed to Georgia's state elections board. Other conservative activists linked to Mitchell have also claimed that Moncla's work helped fuel government investigations related to Fulton County. According to a recording, that's right, it sort of rhymes, according to a recording of a December video conference call obtained by ProPublica, two activists associated with Mitchell's Election Integrity Network. We've definitely heard of them before. alleged that the Justice Department had used files and exhibits from Moncla's research in suing Fulton County for the same records seized by the FBI. The DOJ filed the suit the day after purportedly soliciting Moncla's materials, the activists said. They went to Kevin Moncla for that information. Garland Favorito, I don't think I know him either, but he's a leader in the Election Integrity Network, allegedly. It's what he said on this call. Moncla denied speaking with Justice Department officials, but wouldn't say which agency he dealt with. Why not? That seems weird. Favorito also claimed to have sent information to the DOJ himself. I can only assume that that's the ODNI.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue reading through this ProPublica piece about, what's his name here? I keep forgetting what it is. Moncla. Is it Kevin? Yeah, Kevin Moncla. But yeah, as interesting as they note here, Moncla denied speaking with the Justice Department, though he did say, what was his quote? He said he's been interviewed twice by investigators, attorneys of various offices who work on behalf of the U.S. government. Ordinarily, your mind then goes to the Department of Justice. But he does say that he denied having spoken with Justice Department officials, but wouldn't say which agency he dealt with. I mean, in this administration, it could be anybody, but I guess because of the weird involvement in all of this of Tulsi Gabbard and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, who just a week ago was the Office of Do Not Invite, but now finds herself in the middle of everything, I think you can probably start with the assumption that she was speaking to ODNI lawyers and officials working on behalf of the United States government, but who wouldn't be DOJ. But there's also the mention of Garland Favorito, someone also with the Election Integrity Network working with Cleta Mitchell, who said that he had sent some of this information to DOJ himself. So DOJ has the information, even if they're not the ones interviewing Moncla. The DOJ knows who to call to get the information that they need, he said, Favorito said. I'll be honest with you. Oh, now he's going to do it. I'll be honest with you. They rely on a lot of our stuff. So sort of bragging about the connections and their ability to stovepipe nonsense directly into the heads of DOJ people. A spokesperson for the DOJ declined to answer questions related to the claims by Moncla, Favorito, and Mitchell, instead referencing ProPublica to televised comments from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who's really digging a grave for himself in all this, in which he said that the Trump administration is, quote, investigating issues around elections to make sure we have completely fair and appropriate elections. Blanche also said he could not comment on criminal investigations unless he wants to. Mitchell didn't respond to a request for comment from ProPublica, but on the day of the FBI raid, she pointed to information in a report authored by Moncla, as well as as being the basis for the action. Here is her post from Twitter in which she says, "This is the answer to everyone's question. Why did the FBI raid Fulton County's election warehouse? Kevin Moncla has dotted every I and crossed every T, and it is stunning. Read the first 15 pages. Pass it on. Brilliant. Infuriating. And she's referencing here Moncla's own post. The following is our comprehensive report of investigation for Fulton County's 2020 general elections. And he gives a link to a Scribd document. All right, what's it about? Let's see if ProPublica has gotten to the bottom of it. Favorito declined to answer any specific questions, saying that he'd had no contact with the FBI. I mean, I don't know if that was the question, but okay. It's not known what evidence the federal government used to show probable cause for the raid because the underlying affidavit was sealed. Last week, Fulton County commissioners sued to unseal the affidavit, arguing that debunked theories from Moncla and Favorito had supported the federal warrant. Experts say that if the affidavit was based on information sourced from the activists, it would raise questions about the raid's legitimacy. And I do have this note. I know that yesterday, as we ended the show and we're previewing what Justice Putnam had in store for yesterday's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the top billing went to the news that a Trump-appointed federal judge in Atlanta, Georgia, ordered the Trump administration and the FBI to return all and not use any of the over 700 boxes of voting material and data seized in a raid under a criminal warrant. And I said, damn, that's interesting. Too bad I didn't get the opportunity to tell you that was upcoming. But if you listened to the show anyway, you probably know what this story is about. I don't have that link on hand, but maybe Justice will share that one with me and I can read about it. But I just took a quick look at what's in the news currently about them. And although I don't love CBS News and you should never trust them anymore, they did have a story about this yesterday. Fulton County, Georgia election case documents must be unsealed by Tuesday, which is today, judge rules. Is that the same situation or slightly different? Federal judge ordered the public release of key court records tied to the FBI's recent seizure of those materials from Fulton County. In an order issued on Saturday, U.S. District Judge J.P. Bouley, B-O-U-L-E-E, directed the unsealing of the court docket and motions filed by County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts and the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections. The judge also ruled that the DOJ must release the search warrant affidavit used to justify the FBI's search by the close of business Tuesday after redacting the names of non-governmental witnesses. The ruling follows an emergency lawsuit filed by Pitts and county election officials seeking the return of nearly 700 boxes of election records taken during a federal search of Fulton County's elections headquarters in Union City last month. Let's see. Bouley wrote that both sides now agree that the record should be made public, so it's not controversial, and emphasized the importance of transparency in judicial proceedings. But it's not clear to me whether it's the same case and the same judge, and whether Bouley is the one who said that the records have to be returned. Unsealed, yes. Returned, that I haven't seen. But there was reference to an emergency lawsuit filed by Pitts that may or may not be a separate one, but demanding that these things be returned. And I guess if there's been a ruling that says they need to be returned, then it would probably have come in that case. Whether or not that's the same one that led to the order to unseal the affidavit, I am unsure, but we'll figure it out over the next couple of days. But in the meantime, I need to know more about Moncla and the craziness that may be underlying this search warrant. So as we left off, that experts said that if the affidavit was, and it'll be unsealed by the end of today, allegedly, unless they defy a court order, oh no, ask Judge Boasberg whether he thinks they'll do that. But experts say that if that turns out to be the case, well, that would raise some questions about the raid's legitimacy. If the underlying affidavit is based on thoroughly debunked assertions about unlawful activity, I think that is at least the basis for arguing that the probable cause does not exist, said Danielle Lang, the vice president of voting rights at the Campaign Legal Center. Something to keep in mind these days with these weirdos and cheaters and liars who are running the Department of Justice and FBI and others. and in some cases working in U.S. attorneys' offices. If you show up with a warrant and you execute the warrant, that's not the end-all, be-all. You can still say, well, guess what? Warrants are supposed to be based on probable cause, and it's no longer actually true that there was probable cause, and maybe there never was if all of this is based on debunked theories. It may very well be that a federal magistrate judge gets fooled, bamboozled by it. They may be in on it, and in the sense that I'm a believer in election denialism and a U.S. magistrate judge, and I'm going to issue this thing regardless. I will sign it. That will mean that you can show up at the site with something signed by a federal judge, and the opportunity to challenge it comes later. You have to give up the seizure and then go to court and say, I think all of this evidence should be returned and it can't be used in court against us because it was illegally seized. Yes, they had a warrant, but the warrant was based on faulty information. Probable cause never existed. This judge erred, this magistrate erred in issuing the warrant. And that is something that you can absolutely do in federal court later and just say, yeah, for today, we'll jump out of your way. But in terms of using it in a court of law to prove anything, nope, that's not going to fly. If we get to that point, then it'll be really interesting. And then it will become extremely important to find out who is this magistrate judge, what's their background, and who told them that there was probable cause and convinced them to do this, and what's their background. And why are we doing this again? No one knows. Over the weekend, the judge ordered the affidavit to be unsealed by the close of business Tuesday. That's the story we saw from CBS. The 263-page report by Moncla, and they too offer us a link to it so we don't have to go through Twitter to see it. Published in early January is part of a years-long campaign by him, Mitchell, and others to get access to Fulton County's 2020 election records. He acknowledged that not much in the report is new, but rather a compilation of complaints that he and other contributors have filed to Georgia's state election board over the past 5 years. So essentially, it's their list of grievances. Many of the complaints have been dismissed by the board after investigations by Georgia's Republican Secretary of State. Even when investigators have validated aspects of the complaint, they've found no evidence of malfeasance. In one high-profile instance, investigators reported that a small number of inconsistencies were, quote, not due to... everything has shifted here, thanks to the moving of a online ad. All right. In one high-profile instance, investigators reported a small number of inconsistencies were, quote, not due to the intentional misconduct by Fulton County's election staff, but due to, quote, human error in entering the data, and that these, quote, did not affect the result of the 2020 election in Fulton County, which were confirmed as accurate. So, every once in a while you do find some tabulation errors. One, they may or may not have changed the outcome generally of the election. If you said there were 2 ballots cast in favor of Joe Biden in this district when there was in fact only 1, well, that would be an example of something not affecting the material outcome. And then you could also say, oh, by the way, that was just somebody's fingers hitting the wrong key, allegedly. But we can't prove any malfeasance. And proof is the thing we're looking for. And also, it didn't make any real difference in the outcome of the election. That happened time and time again. But they say, well, 20 of these things happened. Yeah, well, so what? Moncla said he didn't trust the Secretary of State's conclusions. So there you go. Calling him, quote, a politician who doesn't have any effing credibility. Well, that'll give you lots of credibility when you add that to your quote. And he said he did his own research, proved the issues with Fulton County's 2020 vote went beyond human error. All right, so give me my day in court, besides the 60 I had before. Okay, someone may say, fine, we'll let you do that. But it would be a mistake to do so. The Secretary of State's office didn't respond to questions about Moncla's criticism. So it comes down to this. Well, we investigated this dozens of times, and every time your own Republican Secretary of State said, no, you're just dumb. You've got it all wrong here. Well, I don't think that's right. I think I'm right. That's it. That's the claim. That was the basis of the affidavit for the seizure of these boxes. That's the probable cause. I say he's wrong. I don't trust him. Well, that's not really a thing. Trump and his lawyers have continued to cite Moncla's claims about election fraud in Fulton County, even as unsavory incidents in his past have surfaced, and other conservatives have called him untrustworthy. And remember, his whole thing is, well, I think Brad Raffensperger is untrustworthy. Okay, but he doesn't have the weird, creepy perv record that you do. Like, for instance, in 2004, when Moncla pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor voyeurism charge and was subsequently ordered by a jury to pay $3.25 million in damages after secretly filming guests in his home bathroom. Yum. Moncla told ProPublica the matter had no bearing on his election-related research. This has nothing to do with this, he said. That was 20 years ago in a divorce custody battle. Of course it's custody. My goodness. Well, I don't know what to tell you, but I guess you could think of this as a counterpart to the other problem they had in Fulton County when the prosecutor, Fani Willis, had ended up being disqualified from the criminal case they were bringing against Trump and the Trump campaign, and then it got derailed by the fact that she hired a lawyer with whom she had a personal relationship, a personal and intimate relationship. And everybody says, oh my God, why couldn't you just, not have that problem? I wish. People are flawed, and maybe that has nothing to do with anything. But, if you're going to point to that and say, no, she can't prosecute this case because look at this. Well, the affidavit in your case is filed by a guy who was filming people in his bathroom. Well, but that was about a custody battle. You damn right that would come up in a custody battle. Stop filming people in your bathroom and stop pleading guilty to it, too, if you didn't do it. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. Well, neither does Fani Willis's relationship with the guy she hired, but somehow now we think it does. So sorry, you lose. In a case stemming from the 2020 election, a lawyer for the conservative website The Gateway Pundit, also not particularly credible, right, called Moncla, quote, a goddamn fraud and a known fabricator, according to a court filing. So if you have lost even the very liberal Gateway Pundit, right? The messages were revealed in a defamation lawsuit against the website, which had accused 2 election workers in Fulton County of committing fraud. One of the site's reporters had communicated with Moncla. The case ended in a settlement, the terms of which were not disclosed. Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, was ordered, of course, to pay around $150 million for repeating related discredited claims against the 2 election workers. You know all about that. But there was an extra side suit about the Gateway Pundit telling you. If Gateway Pundit says this guy isn't even trustworthy, what can you do? Moncla said people were free to examine his research and make up their own minds, but that he's a pervert. I'll add that. I don't want people to trust me, he said. I want people to trust the county's records and facts. No, you don't. You want them to not trust them so that they listen to you. And the report, which he described as meticulously documented, like the people who went to his bathroom. Moncla said he's been surprised by the FBI. He was surprised by the raid. Really? Okay, sure. Which he found out about via Fox News. He also said he thought his report was being exploited for political gain and that what he's found shouldn't be the basis for a criminal action. Oh, okay. Well, should have spoken up. I'm not saying that Trump won the election. I'm saying that Georgia's election system is broken and needs to be fixed. He said, I don't want anyone to go to jail. I don't want anyone to be hurt. Well, I think that's probably a lie, and it's too little too late. So now we have a new name on our lists here, Kevin Moncla, and we'll see how often he pops up in the future. All right. I mentioned that there was yet more Epstein stuff, and there is. And let me read you what Julie Brown has for us in the Miami Herald. And let's see if I can read it directly from the Miami Herald. Trump told Palm Beach police chief, quote, everyone knew about Epstein, comma, Maxwell was, quote, evil. But let's move her to a minimum security prison and start talking clemency, right? This is the latest from Julie K. Brown. And golly, you'll never believe it. Oh, and we've lost our ability to read it. Yesterday, I think it was being passed around as a gift article, and we read it once, and that's all you're allowed, I guess, over at the Miami Herald. So Instapaper to the rescue. President Donald Trump has repeatedly maintained that he had no knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes, right? And everybody kind of knew that can't possibly be true. And we know what to say about it. Right. We believe you. In July of 2006, though, just as Jeffrey Epstein's criminal case became public, Trump called then Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Reiter. Is it Reiter or Reiter? It's Reiter. I think probably we'll go with Reiter on that. To tell him that Epstein's activities with teenage girls were well known both in New York and Palm Beach. So this is one of those weird situational things in which Trump is probably telling a story that is, in fact, part of the truth, even if he's shading things to help himself for various reasons. And there's lots of theories why this would be happening. But this is interesting. This is amazing that this had not yet come to light. Although I wonder whether Julie K. Brown is like, well, I'm telling the rest of the story now, but everybody knew that this happened. And I think that she probably did. But maybe she knew this information from under different circumstances, is what I'm going to guess. But here's what's being documented now. And she does it carefully. So, in July of 2006, just as Epstein's criminal case becomes public, Trump calls the police chief and says, oh, everybody knew about this. And says, ready for this one? Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this, Trump told Reiter. That was a quote. According to a 2019 FBI interview with Reiter that's contained in the Justice Department's Epstein case files. The interview, conducted in October of 2019, remember, this is in 2019, they asked Reiter about the time Trump called you in 2006. I don't know whether that was the point of getting to things in the interview or it's just tell us what you got, and this is what he offered up. So the interview, conducted in October of 2019 and not previously reported, even by Julie Brown apparently, has shed new light on Trump's involvement in the early stages of the 2006 Jeffrey Epstein investigation in Palm Beach, Florida. It also raises questions about how much Trump knew about Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's crimes. But he wishes her well, right? Reiter told FBI agents that Trump revealed that Epstein's associate, Maxwell, was Epstein's, quote, operative, and that Trump said, quote, she is evil and to focus on her, according to this report. Wow, that's a long way from evil to maybe I'll give you clemency. Trump told Reiter that, quote, he was around Epstein once when, now I guess I'm not sure who we're quoting here, if this is a quote of Trump saying it, but this actually, it sets up, it sounds like Reiter telling the FBI the following, quote, that Trump told me he was around Epstein once when teenagers were present, and Trump, quote, got the hell out of there, the report said. Trump also told Reiter that he threw Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club. And that, of course, very much in dispute. That stands in sharp contrast to what Trump told reporters in July of 2019 when he was asked if he had any knowledge that Epstein molested girls. I'm going to pause it a second here and just say, in the tape that I had but didn't play of Congresswoman Ballant noting that they were all a bunch of sick Fs, which he figured out by spending half an hour reading the unredacted Epstein files. The Dropbox News correspondent asks, I forget how that sets up, but basically she says, so I've read other documents and here's what I picked up today. What I read today was information indicating that it was just a flat out lie that Trump ever kicked Epstein out of the Mar-a-Lago club. So I think that's important to read alongside this report here from Julie Brown. So, okay, I haven't seen that bit of the Epstein files, but maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about that in the days to come. So that does, in fact, stand in sharp contrast with what Trump told reporters in July of 2019 when he was asked if he had any knowledge that Epstein had molested girls. No, I had no idea. I had no idea, Trump said at the time. Reiter, who retired as chief in 2009, confirmed to the Miami Herald that he was interviewed by FBI agents in 2019. He said the conversation with Trump happened in July 2006. The new information about Trump's 2006 comments comes as Maxwell was summoned to appear by video yesterday, before the House Oversight Committee. Maxwell, now 64, is serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking related to her and Epstein's sex abuse of minors. She invoked her Fifth Amendment right not to testify before the committee, although her lawyer noted that she is, quote, prepared to speak fully and honestly if granted clemency by President Trump. I have seen other people saying, well, what could it possibly mean that she takes the Fifth Amendment when she's asked, did you ever see Trump engaged in any inappropriate behavior with underage girls? Take the Fifth Amendment. Obviously, many people, I think reasonably, do say, well, if the answer was no, she would just offer that. That would get her clemency. But she invokes the Fifth instead. So it must mean that the answer is yes. Although I'm not certain that that's the case. It could also mean the answer is no, but I'm not going to give you that exoneration unless you give me clemency first. I can clear you, even if it's truthful information. I could clear you. Why not give me clemency in order to do it? I mean, you don't need it in order to give that information. You should just be offering it up instead. But I don't know. She may just be leveraging it for that purpose. Anyway, Trump has, of course, not said whether he would or would not pardon her. When asked about her arrest in July of 2020, Trump said, I just wish her well, frankly. Everyone remembers that. Maxwell's attempts to appeal her conviction have been unsuccessful, but she has filed a legal petition arguing that her trial was unfair. The circumstances behind Reiter's 2019 FBI interview have also not been reported before. The FBI agents came to Palm Beach at the former police chief's request to pick up 2 boxes of Epstein case files that were found in the home of Joe Recarey, I don't know how he pronounces Recarey, the lead detective who handled the case. Recarey, age 50 when he died of natural causes in May of 2018. And his widow moved out of the area. Reiter notified the FBI after the boxes were turned over to him, the report said. That's how that interview came to pass, I guess. He told the FBI that one of the boxes contained an imaged copy of a laptop computer from Epstein's kitchen counter that had phone messages on it that Reiter had not seen before, the FBI report said. The report did not say what else was in the boxes. The interview is 4 pages, focusing mostly on Reiter's summary of the Palm Beach Police Department's investigation into Epstein, which began in 2003, when the police received a report that young women were seen going in and out of Epstein's waterfront mansion at 358 El Brillo Way. I don't know whether that's pronounced the Spanish way, El Brillo, or the anglicized way, like the cleaning product, El Brillo Way, but you can find it either way. That all on, of course, Palm Beach Island. The police set up surveillance at Epstein's house. I'm just thinking about this guy spent decades wondering, when are they going to get this guy? So the police set up surveillance of Epstein's house, but upon checking the identities of 2 of the women who were visiting, found them to be adults. Amazingly enough, the case was closed because police found no evidence of a crime at the time. Then, in March of 2005, Palm Beach police received a call from a woman reporting that her 14-year-old stepdaughter had been molested by Epstein. Upon interviewing the girl, she told them that other girls were being sexually assaulted as part of an organized scheme in which high school girls were being recruited to give Epstein massages that led to assault and at times even rape, according to Reiter's account, which is also backed up by court files. More surveillance was done on Epstein's house, Reiter told FBI agents. Some kids were observed prepubescent with braces and backpacks coming from school. One employee said there were dozens of girls in one day. The Palm Beach Police Department then put together a case and brought it to the state attorney's office. Ryder explained that he was upset when the state attorney, Barry Krischer, rebuffed police efforts to arrest Epstein in 2006. After Kreischer declined to prosecute, Ryder took the unusual step of writing a letter to ask Kreischer to recuse himself from the case. And when he refused, Ryder then took the case to Miami's U.S. Attorney's Office and asked for an FBI investigation into the case. So there's the one guy actually doing the right stuff in all of this, sitting in retirement wondering what the F ever happened. The case was turned over to the Miami U.S. Attorney's Office in early of 2007. We know the story, I think, from there. Epstein hired a team of high-powered attorneys and private investigators, whom Ryder said followed him and the other police officers assigned to the case and picked through their trash in order to find something they could use to discredit them. Oh my God, they were trying to dox the police? I thought we didn't stand for that. Epstein lived less than a mile from Pervalago, by the way, around 2000, and Maxwell, Epstein's former girlfriend, recruited 16-year-old Virginia Giuffre, as we know, who worked at Mar-a-Lago's spa as an attendant. And she, of course, died by suicide last year. She had said, Jeffrey, that Maxwell approached her while she was working at the spa, offered her as a job as a masseuse for a wealthy man. It was Maxwell who introduced her to Epstein. You know all about that. But then, of course, there's more further on down, how basically Ryder tells the FBI, as it moves to that level, that by 2007, he became troubled by the fact that federal prosecutors still had not arrested Epstein. So he requested a meeting with then Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, and you all know who he is, to find out why. Acosta told him that the defense attorneys had frustrated prosecutors, and there was a lot of interest from higher up, whatever that means.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
A lot more to it, of course. Ryder told the FBI that the FBI felt was there in a hurry to make this case go away. Shortly after meeting with Acosta, he then found out on television that Epstein had been given federal immunity. And then it all goes downhill from there. We'll see you tomorrow, of course. Stay tuned for Justice next.